There is a playground in Hong Kong that the map still remembers but the city prefers to forget. By day it is a shallow bowl of cracked rubber, a skeleton of metal frames rusting to the color of dried blood. A sun-bleached slide leans like a broken tooth. Weeds have learned the outline of every abandoned game. No one goes there anymore, even stray dogs skirt its fence. As if the place smells of storms that never come. At night, something changes. The lamps along the alley dim for no electrical reason. As though a hand closes over their light. The air turns heavier, cooler, laced with a faint sweetness, cheap syrup, stale candy, cut by the iron taste of water standing too long in a pipe. And in the middle of the yard, two swings hang from a crossbar. One is knotted uselessly around itself. The other begins to move. Not with wind, there is none. Not with traffic, the streets are still. Back and forth, slow and patient, the seat arcs through the dark, creaking in a small voice that sounds uncomfortably like breath. Locals say if you sit on it after midnight, you will feel a gentle push from behind. If you turn to see who's there, you won't leave. Adrian was a university student who believed more in textbooks than in superstition. He was 21, living in a cramped dormitory where the walls were too thin to keep out the noise of other lives. Exams pressed on him, deadlines stacked like bricks on his shoulders. And his only relief was wandering through the city at night when the streets emptied and the air smelled of damp stone. That was how he found himself in a neighborhood he didn't recognize. A cluster of mid-century apartment blocks clinging together like survivors in a storm. Their balconies leaned inward, hung with forgotten laundry stiff as paper. And their windows reflected nothing, only darkness. The roads grew narrower as he walked. Until finally he came to a cul-de-sac hemmed in by tall walls. At the far end, framed by iron gates that sagged with rust, the playground waited. It looked like a photograph faded almost to white, a merry-go-round listing to one side, paint peeled to bare metal, a slide cracked open like a scar. The sandbox had become a swamp of weeds. The swing set stood at the center, its chains blackened, its crossbar bowed but unbroken. One swing was tangled in its own chain, useless. The other hung perfectly straight, as though someone had just stepped off moments ago. Adrian stopped at the gate. The air was different here, thinner, quieter, as though the city had stopped breathing. Even the faint hum of traffic behind him seemed muted, replaced by the high ringing silence of places abandoned for too long. He tightened his grip on his backpack strap, telling himself it was nothing but curiosity. The fascination of stumbling into a forgotten corner. And yet he felt watched, not by the dark windows of the surrounding buildings, but from within the playground itself, as though something under the cracked asphalt had lifted its head to notice him. He thought about turning back, but a faint metallic squeak drifted across the yard. The second swing moved forward a fraction, then back again, the chains groaning softly in the still air. Adrian swallowed, heart quickening. Wind, he told himself, just wind, but the trees behind the fence were perfectly still. Adrian pushed the gate, the hinges screamed in protest. The kind of metallic cry that carried farther than it should. The sound bounced between the surrounding buildings, waking nothing, but making him feel as though he had just announced his arrival to someone who had been waiting. He stepped inside, the cracked ground groaned beneath his sneakers. Weeds scratching at his ankles like brittle fingers. At first, he told himself he would only take a look, snap a picture. Laugh about it later. The rational part of his mind catalogued everything he saw. A slide collapsed on one side. Its once bright surface blistered and gray. A seesaw sunk unevenly into the soil. One end jutting up like a bone. Graffiti flaking off the concrete wall. The names of teenagers who had left this place behind decades ago. But the swing moved with a rhythm too steady to ignore. Forward, back, not a wild rocking, not the twitch of metal unsettled by a stray breeze, but the careful motion of someone sitting invisible, pumping legs slowly. The sound it made was worse than the sight, a squeak too close to a sigh. The chains breathing with each arc. Adrian tried to brush it off. Wind tunnels, vibrations from traffic. his mind making shapes out of shadows. He forced a laugh and said aloud, "Creepy, but that's all." His voice cracked on the final word, swallowed instantly by the silence that hung over the place. As he circled the swing set, he felt a sudden change in the air. It grew cooler, the kind of damp chill that seeps into bone, reminding him of the underground tunnels beneath Central Station. He rubbed his arms, but the cold wasn't on his skin alone, it was inside him. A hollowing chill that made his stomach tighten. Then came the smell, sweet at first, like caramelized sugar, followed by the sourness of something left too long in the sun. He frowned, searching for a source, but the scent clung to the air with no origin, like the ghost of a memory. He raised his phone to capture the scene, thinking he might show his friends as proof of his midnight adventure. The camera app opened with a flicker, and for a second the screen displayed the playground exactly as his eyes saw it. Then static danced across the pixels. When the image cleared, Adrian froze. On the screen, the playground was not empty. Faint figures lined the sandbox, children, blurred and pale, as though drawn in chalk. They stood perfectly still, facing the swings, their heads tilted in unison. Their outlines wavered like smoke, but the hollows of their eyes were sharp, dark pits that locked onto him. Adrian lowered the phone in a panic. Empty. He raised it again. They were back. He dropped the device, the clatter breaking the silence, and stumbled backward, heart thundering. His breath came fast, clouding in the cold air. A sound followed, the quick, light giggle of a child. It wasn't playful, it was broken, as if laughter had been cracked in half. He spun around, scanning the shadows, but saw nothing. The giggle came again, closer this time, brushing past his ear. He jerked his head to the side, but only emptiness met him. From the corner of his eye, movement flashed across the sandbox, a shadow darting low and fast. He turned his head sharply, only to see the weeds swaying as though something had just passed through them. The swing groaned louder, moving higher now, higher than any invisible breeze could carry it. And then he felt it, the faint pressure of fingers against his wrist. Small, delicate, but ice cold. He yanked his hand back instinctively. The touch was gone, but the impression remained, tingling as though marked. He stood in the middle of the playground, surrounded by silence, the phone forgotten on the ground. The swing kept moving, forward, back, patient, relentless, as if waiting for him to take a seat. Adrian tried to leave. He bent down, snatched his phone from the ground, and shoved it into his pocket. His steps quickened toward the gate, every instinct screaming at him to get out. But when he pressed against the bars, the metal resisted. The gate hadn't been locked when he came in, yet now it would not yield. He rattled it, kicked at it, but the iron only groaned as though welded shut by something unseen. The playground behind him seemed to exhale. He turned back reluctantly, pulse racing. The swing was still moving, higher now, the chains rattling with the force of its arc. The merry-go-round, silent until now, began to rotate. Slow at first, then faster, the rust screaming as if in protest. Adrian's breath came sharp, ragged. He told himself it was an earthquake tremor, a gust of wind, anything, but the ground beneath his feet was still, and the air around him dead calm. He fumbled his phone again, desperate for the light. The screen lit his face in pale blue glow. The camera app was still open. Against his better judgment, he raised it once more. The screen showed him something that his eyes refused. The playground was crowded. Children stood everywhere, on the seesaw, along the sandbox, beside the crooked slide. Their shapes were faint, translucent, but the darkness where their eyes should be was unmistakable. None of them moved, none of them blinked. They only stared at him, as though waiting for him to join them. Adrian lowered the phone, empty space, raised it again. The children were back. One boy in the crowd lifted his arm slowly, pointing at him. Adrian dropped the phone, the image winking out with a dull thud on the pavement. Then the voices began, whispering, 100 voices at once, weaving through each other like strands of smoke. He could not make out the words at first, just the cadence of children reciting in unison. Like nursery rhymes mumbled in the dark, the whispers thickened, grew clearer. Come play, stay? The sound came from everywhere, above, below, all around, until his knees threatened to give way. His hands clamped over his ears, but the voices were inside his head, pressing against his skull like water filling a glass. The air shifted again, thick with a smell so acrid it burned his throat. It was smoke, not cigarette smoke, but the choking, oily reek of fire-consuming wood, paint, cloth. Adrian gagged, coughing, eyes watering, his mind scrambled for memory. He remembered an online forum, a rumor half read, half dismissed. A kindergarten fire in the late 1970s. Locked doors, no survivors, the building demolished, paved over. Some locals whispered the playground had been built atop the ashes. He thought it coincidence then. Now, standing in this haunted yard, surrounded by invisible voices, it felt like truth. The whispering rose to cries. The merry-go-round spun violently, too fast for rusted joints, shrieking as though metal itself screamed. The slide rattled, shaking in place. A sharp metallic clang rang out as the tangled swing tore loose from its knot and hung straight again. Both swings moved now, back and forth in perfect unison. Adrian staggered backward, heart pounding against his ribs. His shoe struck something hard. He looked down and froze. The cracked asphalt had split beneath the swings. Small objects jutted up from the soil, melted plastic blocks. The scorched head of a doll. A child's shoe blackened by fire. He crouched involuntarily, reaching a trembling hand toward the toy. A sudden cold washed over him, so intense it felt like water pouring down his spine. The whispers silenced all at once, replaced by one voice, a girl's, clear and soft, speaking directly into his ear. "Don't leave us." He spun around, no one there, but the swing nearest him slammed forward, chains snapping taut with a sound like bone breaking. The seat stopped inches from his chest, held as if by a child gripping it from behind. Adrian stumbled back, the air shimmered before his eyes, heat mirage and smoke blending. For a split second, the playground shifted, the weeds and rust vanished. Instead, bright paint glistened under the sun and the air filled with the laughter of children. Teachers clapped at the sidelines. Smiling, Adrian blinked, flames tore through the vision, swallowing color in black smoke. Children screamed, pounding on locked doors that weren't there a moment ago. The swing set remained untouched, swaying calmly as the world burned. He cried out, clutching his head. The vision snapped away, leaving him kneeling in the deserted lot. Tears stung his eyes from smoke that no longer existed, but the smell lingered, heavy and cruel. Behind him, faint footsteps pattered across the cracked surface. He turned sharply, shadows scuttled just beyond his sight. The laughter came again, short, broken, wrong. Adrian realized then that he wasn't just trespassing. He was being invited, and invitations, he suspected, were not meant to be refused. Adrian's breaths came shallow, each one slicing into his lungs as though the air itself rejected him. He stumbled to the seesaw, gripped its rusted handle for balance, and forced his eyes shut. None of this is real, he told himself. Stress, exhaustion, hallucinations, but the sharpness of the burned plastic smell told him otherwise. The icy prickles running along his arms told him otherwise. The swing's ceaseless groan told him otherwise. When he opened his eyes, the world flickered again. For a heartbeat, the playground was alive. Children running, shouting, colliding into each other. A woman in a blue uniform blew a whistle, her lips shaping a smile. Then the vision fractured. Smoke rolled in, thick and black, crawling across the ground. The teacher's whistle turned into a scream. The children pressed against invisible doors, fists pounding until their knuckles bled. Their eyes met Adrian's, hollow with terror. The smoke dissolved, the playground returned to weeds and rust. And Adrian was alone, but he now understood. He had been wrong to dismiss the rumors. This place was the kindergarten. The fire had not ended with the demolition of the building, it had seeped into the soil. The metal, the very chains of the swings. What survived was not wood or paint. but the cries of children who had never been buried properly, never been mourned enough to move on. His phone buzzed in his pocket. With trembling hands, he pulled it out. The screen glowed though he hadn't touched it. A video played, shaky, monochrome. It showed the playground again. Years younger. A birthday party. Children with hats made of paper. Cake cut into uneven slices. Their joy radiated even through the grainy footage. Then the scene shifted violently. A flash, a scream, the camera dropping to the ground. All Adrian could see was the swing swaying in the smoke. The screen glitched, static breaking across it, and a line of text scrolled at the bottom, letters warped but legible. "We never left." His stomach twisted. He dropped the phone and stepped back. His heel struck something solid. He looked down. The crack in the asphalt beneath the swings had widened. Blackened wood fragments jutted upward. Charred beams that once might have been doorframes. Among them lay a row of small, brittle bones. Adrian's chest clenched. He knelt despite himself, brushing away dirt with his fingertips. A child's skull stared back at him, jaw tilted as though frozen mid-cry. A sudden rush of voices surged inside his head. Not whispers this time, but pleas. Dozens of children, calling names, crying for mothers, begging for water. The sound overwhelmed him, a storm of need pressing from every angle. He clamped his hands over his ears. But the cries were inside, not outside. From the corner of his vision, movement, he turned. The girl stood there again, the one he had glimpsed in the vision. Long hair singed at the tips. A stuffed bear dangling from her soot-stained fingers. Her eyes were empty pits. Yet somehow he knew she was looking directly at him. She stepped closer. The bear's head brushed the ground. Her lips parted, cracked and blackened, but the words were clear. "Don't let us be forgotten." Adrian's throat went dry. He understood now. The swing wasn't just a toy that moved on its own. It was an anchor, a memorial. The children's spirits clung to it, replaying their last moments endlessly, ensuring that the city that built over them would never erase them completely. And anyone who stumbled into their world, anyone who watched too long, became part of their remembrance. The girl lifted her hand. For an instant, Adrian thought she meant to guide him out, to free him, but as her fingers hovered near his chest, he felt the air around him squeeze, like the tightening of a fist. Her whisper slid into his ear once more, soft but sharp, "Stay with us, forever." The girl's outstretched hand hovered inches from Adrian's chest. The air around her shimmered as if a furnace burned inside her small body. Though no heat touched him, only cold, an emptiness that seeped into his bones. His heart hammered as he stumbled back, but the children emerged from the shadows behind her, one by one, until the playground was full. They were translucent, flickering like film frames caught in a projector. Some clutched half-melted toys. Others held each other's hands, faces gaunt and eyes dark voids. They did not blink, they did not breathe, they only advanced in silence, their small feet padding across the cracked asphalt without sound. Adrian backed into the seesaw, breath ragged. The swing behind him groaned louder and louder until the sound drowned his heartbeat. Back and forth, faster, harder, chains screaming in agony. Suddenly the seat shot forward, slamming into his hip and knocking him sideways. He staggered, clutching his side, when the voices began again. But they weren't whispers anymore. The voices were a chorus, hundreds of children crying, laughing, screaming, all at once. It shook the air like thunder. Adrian collapsed to his knees, hands pressed against his skull as though his head would split. Their words echoed through him, relentless. "Stay, stay, stay?" He looked up, gasping, and the world shifted once more. Smoke swallowed the playground, and he was no longer in the present. He was there, inside the fire. The building stood intact, a kindergarten classroom. Curtains burned like torches along the walls, and children beat their fists on the locked doors, coughing, wailing, eyes wide with terror. Teachers shouted commands, their faces twisted in despair, until the smoke silenced them. Adrian coughed violently, throat searing, eyes stinging. The heat seared his skin though his mind screamed it wasn't real. He tried to run, but every step only carried him deeper into the flames. The swing stood at the center of the inferno, untouched, swaying gently. Its chains glowed red but never melted. Children collapsed around it, but their shadows rose again, circling, drawn back like moths. Adrian realized with dread, the swing wasn't just a toy. It was the anchor of their tragedy, the axis on which their endless replay turned. The little girl with the bear appeared before him, her hair singed, cheeks streaked with soot. She raised her hand once more, her voice carried above the cries. Steady and calm, you will play with us now. Her palm touched his chest. An icy shock surged through him, freezing his heart. His vision blurred, the fire folding in around him, and for a moment he felt himself slipping, his body still kneeling in the deserted playground, but his soul sinking into their burned world. He saw himself reflected in the girl's hollow eyes, a shadow among them, swaying on the swing. Forever. No, Adrian gasped, forcing the word out. He shoved backward with all the strength panic gave him, breaking her grip. The children wailed in unison, their voices sharp enough to split bone. Shadows lashed toward him, clawing at his arms, dragging him down. The ground beneath his knees gave way. He plunged into darkness, landing hard on something brittle. His hands pressed against it, splintered wood, ash, and bones. Tiny bones, brittle and cold. He scrambled to his feet, horror rising as skeletal hands erupted from the dirt, clutching at his legs, dragging him down again. The merry-go-round spun wildly above, a halo of shrieking rust. The slide bent inward, its metal twisting like wax in fire. The swings whipped violently, their seats cracking the air like whips. And in the center, the girl watched, her head tilted, her smile too wide for her face. Forever, she whispered. Adrian screamed, tearing his legs free. He ran, stumbling toward the gate that had trapped him. The air shifted, heavy as water, pressing him down. Every step felt like moving through tar. Behind him, the children followed, their forms flickering, closing the distance with impossible speed. The gate loomed ahead, still shut, but as Adrian hurled himself against it, the chains rattled, then burst open with a screech like tearing metal. He crashed through, sprawling onto the street outside. The night air hit him like a wave, warm, alive, filled with the distant hum of traffic. He rolled onto his back, chest heaving, eyes darting wildly. The playground lay silent behind the gates. The swings were still again, hanging motionless in the dark. For a heartbeat, he thought he had escaped. Then the sound came, a faint creak. Back and forth, back and forth. The swing moved once more, though no wind touched it. Adrian scrambled to his feet and ran, not daring to look back. The sound followed him down the alley, a whispering rhythm of chains that seemed to echo inside his skull. Even blocks away, the creaking still rang in his ears. And as he ran, he felt it, a brush against his back, small fingers, cold as death, urging him forward, or pulling him back. He didn't stop running until the city swallowed him whole. But even then, the sound stayed with him. Back and forth, the swing that never stops. Adrian never spoke of that night. He told himself silence was safer, that putting words to what he had seen would only give it more power. He avoided the neighborhood entirely, circling wide whenever his late-night walks carried him too close. Still, the playground followed him. In the quiet hours, lying awake in his dorm room, he would hear it, the soft creak of chains swaying in the darkness. A rhythm too precise to be imagination. At first he thought it was memory. Then he realized the sound grew louder on nights when he couldn't sleep. Louder still when he stared too long into the shadows at the far corner of his room. Once, he swore he saw the silhouette of a swing seat gently rocking there. Though no air stirred, the touch stayed with him too. Every so often, while climbing stairs or sitting alone at his desk, he would feel a sudden pressure against his back, a hand. Small and cold, just for a moment, he would whirl around, but of course, no one was there. Some nights, when exhaustion finally pulled him toward sleep, his dreams would carry him back. He would see the fire again, hear the cries of children pressed against locked doors, Feel the heat that wasn't heat and the smoke that wasn't smoke. And always, at the center of it all, the girl with the burned stuffed bear, watching him, smiling, waiting. Adrian never returned to the playground. Yet the thought haunted him. Perhaps he didn't need to. Perhaps once you stepped inside, once you heard the creak of that swing and felt its invitation, a part of you never truly left. The playground still stands, hidden behind its rusted gates, waiting for the next passerby curious enough to push them open. At night, the swing moves on its own, back and forth, patient as time. And if you are ever walking through the forgotten corners of Hong Kong and hear that sound, do not look. Do not follow, because once the swing begins to move for you, it may never stop. Not every haunting is born from hatred. Some linger because of grief, some because of fear, and some because of the unbearable weight of being forgotten. The playground is more than a ruin, it is a scar, carved into the fabric of the city. A place where laughter once lived and where screams replaced it in a single night. The children who remain are not monsters in the truest sense. They are fragments of lives interrupted, shadows clinging to the only place they knew. Their desire is simple and devastating, to be remembered. But longing, when it festers, can twist into something dangerous. What begins as a plea for recognition becomes a demand for company. What begins as sorrow becomes hunger. Adrian learned that night that some places hold memory like bone holds marrow. You can pave over a tragedy, build swings and slides over the ashes, but the ground remembers, and when memory is strong enough, it refuses to be silent. Perhaps the lesson is this: when we forget the dead, when we bury their names with their bodies, we create ghosts. They do not always rise with chains and screams. Sometimes they rise with whispers, with laughter, with the simple motion of a swing that never stops. And the danger is not only in seeing them, it is in answering. For once you acknowledge the invitation, you may find yourself seated beside them, swaying in time with the endless rhythm of their loss.